Greetings, welcome to the latest of my deep dive videos. Today I'm going to explore the arrival of the lovely, gorgeous Venus in the first of her two home signs of Taurus. This begins in terms of universal on the 6th of June through to the 4th of July. But what makes this particularly symbolically important is this year Venus has been going through 3 zodiac signs, but 2 of them twice. And the latter, Aries, is where she's debilitated. So over the last 5 weeks, Venus has been retracing her steps. The reason for this, that retrograde which began on March the 2nd for 6 weeks through to April the 13th. Venus very much affects our values. It can be to do with the way we present ourselves, how we feel about our attractiveness, but also it can be about money, but it can also be about relationships. But in terms of its rulership of the sign of Taurus, this is very much to do with an earthy sensuality. And of course it's a fixed sign. So Venus in Taurus is very potentially coquettish and seductive, but it can make us much more conscious of our relationship to finances, but also our values. But the critical thing about that retrograde is in the sign of Pisces, it can be about deep reflection and sometimes endings. Whereas Aries, it can be about new beginnings, but sometimes new beginnings that don't actually end up being lasting. And also the energy of Venus in Aries can be very impulsive, so it can make things happen, but is it a sustained relationship or a sustained approach to how we're generating money or income? So this arrival of Venus back into the first of her 2 home signs this year is really, really welcome. But we just need to be aware that with Venus scudding through the sky, through those 3 zodiac signs, but 2 of them twice, it has been a very frustrating year, I feel, for all sorts of relationships, but also for our financial situation too. Not least that as far back as January the 19th, Venus was in affliction with the steely, cold, restrictive energies of Saturn. So as Venus emerges into Taurus, there's a lot to celebrate. But we also need to be conscious, as ever, of when a planet moves, the ingress, at that exact moment, what's the big picture? What are the other interplanetary influences impacting on that arrival, and therefore likely to be a backdrop for the whole period of that particular visit? So we can think about Venus in Taurus in isolation, but we really need to be aware of the 2 event charts. So I'm going to share with you the solar event chart and also the natal event chart, which actually puts Venus in the very sociable 11th house. I'm astrologer Patrick Arundell. I'm going to unpack all of this for you. Thank you so much for joining me. All your views and interactions are truly appreciated. We have found that 50% of the people who regularly watch this channel are not subscribers. If that's you, please help it to thrive and click that sub button, but also the bell notification symbol. If you'd like to have a one-to-one with me directly, please check out my testimonials below. It would be a pleasure to assist. Also, please check out my new website at patrickarundell.com. You can get your free daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, general, love and Vedic horoscopes, but also use as much as you want my sensational 3-card tarot. Please see the link below for more. If you become a member of this YouTube channel, I really appreciate that too. If you'd like to become a member, I have set the entry level at a very, I hope, affordable rate. Please see below for more. So Venus started this year in the sign of Aquarius, which is lovely for being more conscious of who we connect with and also celebrating the things we have in common rather than being focused on our differences. But Venus then travelled into the sign of Pisces, where she is exalted. She can be very mystical and also perhaps at times maybe especially in the conjunction with Neptune, able for us to reach a higher dimension in terms of our connections to others. But because of that clash with Saturn, I don't feel the last couple of months have been easy at all. And as I mentioned, Venus in Aries is also not an easy transit at the best of times before we then put into the equation the retrograde, which can create mistimed approaches, frustrations, whether it is about relationships or money. So let's just think about the archetype of Venus in the sign of Taurus. It's a fixed sign. It is, of course, a earth sign, so it likes stability, it likes constantness. But here it is asking us to be mindful of what our personal value is, but also our personal attractiveness, I feel. That sensual magic of the sign of Taurus, very, very important. Now, subjects with Venus in Taurus are possibly people with a much stronger appreciation of continuity because of that fixed energy. But also there is the potential for being perhaps a little bit too invested or perhaps too attached to things, whether it's possessions or someone we're drawn towards. Also, if you are someone like me who does have a tendency for a sweet tooth, we may find that that diet plan is going to be severely tested over the next few weeks. As ever, it's important to have some things that we can enjoy, immerse ourselves in. Pleasure is very much part of the Venus in Taurus magic. So if we do want to enjoy lovely food, really nice wine and just creature comforts, why not? But of course, as ever, it's all about the proportion. If you are someone with an appreciation of the arts, you're a maker or a creator, or you love fashion, whether you're a dedicated follower of the latest trends, or you're someone with an innate appreciation of upcycling, repurposing things that are already made because you have a strong connection to environmental issues, that can work well for you too. And if you don't want to be eating at a really nice restaurant, you can of course grow your own. So Venus in Taurus, I think, gives us a love of the more aesthetic, practical, earthy parts of life, and part of that could be growing our own vegetables but cooking our own food from scratch too. So I'm going to go through each of the 12 zodiac signs after I've shared with you the 2 event charts, the solar event chart that we can all collectively relate to as far as the overall zodiac, but also the exact event chart based on Greenwich because of the prime meridian and universal time, which does give us an interesting ascendant in the sign of Gemini and also conjunct the mighty giant Jupiter. So on the screen now is the solar event chart, and you can see Venus is in house 2 as expected, and by the 9th of this month it is going to be in an exact square with Pluto. But what we must bear in mind is that through to the 4th of July, that energy of Venus's square with Pluto, which is about 3.5 degrees, is going to be very much to the fore. So if we encounter someone who flatters us, is very good at charming us, that's very Venusian, telling us perhaps what we'd like to hear, we just need to be conscious of what their motivation is, which they may not be revealing. So that can be secrets, which can be Pluto, but secret power. And that can be true whether someone seems to be attracted to us in a romantic context or perhaps priming up the potential to work together. And all these benefits are going to be there. You're going to be such an asset to our organisation and so on. And it could be that we're going to encounter either of those situations and they can be completely genuine. But it's just important to be mindful of how with Pluto and Venus that praise and that seduction can be laid on with a celestial trowel, because that is very hard to resist, but actually we just need to be conscious what that motive is. Now, if 2 people are in the same part of their lives at the same time and both want a transactional connection, why not? But if one person wants something deeper and more meaningful and the other person just it's friends with benefits, Pluto in Aquarius, that could be quite hurtful. Also, if we're thinking about mixing business with pleasure, so we've got a friend who's got a great business idea, oh look, we've got to work together on that, just be aware of the potential pitfalls. So it's not that it can't work, but it's important to understand what the potential downsides could be. So on the screen now, I'm showing the event chart from a natal perspective. I'm using Placidus, a proportional house system, the ascendant late in the sky in the sign of Gemini. But the critical thing is Jupiter. So that gives this event, I feel, particularly with Jupiter just on the cusp of moving into Cancer, which is going to occur on the 9th of June, is really giving us a cause to feel that something very positive can happen. Not least because later on, as Venus moves into Taurus, later on in the day, Mercury and Jupiter will forge a conjunction. And after all Jupiter's travails being challenged by Saturn over the last year, if we've really persisted in something that we're very invested in, an idea, a business, we've been very entrepreneurial, despite any sort of roadblocks and resistance we've encountered, there could be some kind of breakthrough, and that could lead to some kind of financial reward, because of course Venus moving into Taurus can bring an uptick in loot. However, we need to be aware that in this chart Venus is in the 11th house, so over these weeks through to the 4th of July, the inference here is that we're going to encounter lots of different people. So if we do, are we going to be reluctant to get to know certain people because they have different viewpoints, values? And of course, those are important things that guide all of us. But also because, again, of the square to Pluto, here there may be someone who's very persuasive with Pluto in the 9th house. And actually, we may feel that we don't want to let the side down in some kind of group dynamic by resisting what someone's proposing. Maybe to go on a holiday, maybe to celebrate someone's nuptials, whatever it is. If we feel a little bit railroaded into something, that's something to be conscious of and to perhaps be up for resisting. So what about the upcoming aspects that we're going to encounter through to the 4th of July, when Venus moves into the lovely sign of Gemini? Well, I think that first one between Pluto is really important. It becomes exact on the 9th, but also in week 2 of June, we do have a lovely link between Venus and Mercury. So Venus relates in terms of its rulership of Libra, but remember in Taurus, it needs to experience something that makes it feel good. And Mercury in Cancer is also open to a much more refined connection in terms of how it thinks. Now, the emotionality of Cancer can diminish the clarity of Mercury, but I feel that that's a lovely influence. So we could encounter someone, for example, it could be a family get-together, it could be with some neighbours, some people in our community, there could be some kind of gathering, and I actually feel it could be very blessed and really lovely. But right at the start of July, there is a really important conjunction between Venus and Uranus, but by then Venus is in the 3rd of her decans, using the triplicity decan approach, and that means the subruler is Saturn. Saturn can create resistance, and Uranus, of course, is the freedom lover. So we may find right at the start of July that we encounter someone who is very, very hard to resist, or we may feel an existing situation suddenly seems very dull, very tired, and very boring. And that can give us the desire to do something provocative or actually check out and regain our freedom. And obviously Venus going into Gemini can be enormously flirty. So just interesting that I feel the backdrop energy of Venus in the square with Pluto is the most important influence. But as Venus gets to the end of the process, the fact that it combines with the planet of freedom, the planet of independence, the planet of disruption, but critically the planet of higher truths, whether it is around a financial matter or it is around a relationship, we're probably going to know exactly where we stand by the time Venus moves into Gemini. So it's going to be a case of stick or twist for some people, but particularly people who are already in a relationship, you're going to know much more about how that relationship is faring as we enter the second week of July. Now, please stay with me as I go through each of the 12 zodiac signs from Aries through to Pisces to tell you what I feel that you can expect. Now, you can relate to these in terms of your ascendant, sun or the moon. People often ask me, what should I view? If you know your astrology well, the ascendant is really important to understand the house that Venus is travelling through at the present time. But we can always, all of us, watch the sun. The sun is perhaps more the heart of who we are. It's the heartbeat, if you like. It's the thrust, the more physical, energetic side of our desires. And the moon is more about how we feel, our need for security, the more empathetic part of our situation. But if you know your chart well, definitely ascendant. If you're an aficionado of astrology, you'll probably watch all three. But if you're not so sure, please check out your sun. Venus has probably at times had your head spinning over the months of this year so far. Because even if you have had some creative ideas, which Venus is very much about, some brilliant ideas, maybe is that when you've tried to take them forward, somehow or another, unforeseen delays have scuppered your progress. So one of the things you will achieve now, if you've really persisted and you were very invested in what you were doing, or perhaps it was around a relationship that you really felt instinctively it was the right one for you, you could start to now get a toehold, a much firmer foundation in that situation, and that is really delightful for you. If, however, you've really worked hard and you're not going to see a return now, you may have a decision whether you should persist and try to refine, or maybe it's something you need to head into a new direction with. If there has been some sadnesses around a relationship, maybe you felt much more connected to someone who's not even in your life anymore. It may be that you felt hugely sentimental, maybe very nostalgic. It could be for loved ones. It may have been for a romantic partner that's no longer in your life now. Or maybe a relationship has actually ended, because there is no doubt about it for you. Having Saturn in your 12th house and Venus in touch with it is one of the toughest influences you can go through. So I think that this year so far, whether for your creative ideas, whether for moving forwards in life in general with your desires, Venus, or it has been around money, Venus, or around relationships, Venus, things haven't really been going that quickly for you. But if you have persisted, if you have really got something that's very important to you, that you want to persist with, Venus moving into Taurus could see an uptick in your income, which is really lovely. Just be conscious, however, so in the friendliest part of your chart, but also the part of your chart to do with your future plans, if you're trying to make money around something that just simply doesn't feel worth it, Venus, anymore, then the challenge of Pluto to you may be to seek a new pathway forwards. And that obviously takes a lot of courage sometimes to perhaps accept that we're not enjoying something. I feel that that's a big thing with Venus, particularly in Taurus. It's to enjoy. You know, it isn't just to endure a situation. So whether it's a relationship, a job, an idea you've got, if you're enduring it rather than enjoying it, use that as your guiding principle to decide what to do. But certainly by the time that Venus aligns with Uranus at the start of July, you could have an electric connection to somebody new. You may decide to be completely impulsive and splash out on something that you've desired for some time, or you may decide to try to be more provocative in an existing relationship simply because you almost want to provoke a row to get a reaction to create more excitement. But another thing you could do at the start of July is just change your patterns. Do something completely different to re-engender that spark of attraction between you and yours. Thank you so much for joining me for this Venus Deep Dive special. Please check out my new website at patrickarundell.com. You can get your free daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, general, love and Vedic horoscopes, but also visit and use as much as you like my sensational three card tarot readings. It really is amazing. Please see the link below for more. Now Taurus, for you I'm particularly excited because Venus moving back into your sign is going to have an energetic impact on you. It's going to help you to up your natural magnetism, which I'm not saying has been dimmed, but we can't argue with the fact that Venus in Aries is detrimented. For you it's in your 12th house, which can be sadness, endings, disappointments, and it can also be frustrations. It may have been that you've even had a confidential connection with someone that's not really gone somewhere. It may have been a friend that you had a connection with that somehow or another has been a bit off and on, uncertain. That's just potentially the romantic dimension. But what about the social dimension? I feel that there may have been some disappointments because the connection of Saturn to a number of players in the sign of Pisces is for you very much to do with your friendships, your long-term plan. That all may have been really stuttering this year in quite a major way. So one of the things I love about Venus returning home for you, it's going to give you an extra glow, and that glow is going to help you enormously. Now if you are applying for a job with Pluto at the top of your chart, don't underestimate the power that your charm can have on someone you interact with. But obviously it is important to be able to walk the talk. So if you're having an interview, you make a good impression on someone, that's always very favourable. But it also is important that it does feel like it's the right situation, because Venus in Taurus is about values. You don't want to be investing your energy and time in an organisation which ultimately will irritate you because it's too hierarchical, it doesn't allow you to flourish creatively, it's not going to set you free in terms of your individual talents. So that's something to be mindful of with Venus's square to Pluto. But you are going to have in week 2 that fantastic link to Mercury. Mercury for you in Cancer is chatty. It's a kind of emotional dimension where you can perhaps share or make a more speedy or meet up energy with people that are important to you, but you could be the instigator. There may be someone that you encounter on a daily basis that suddenly you realise that you've got some common interests, or perhaps even you do actually fancy each other. Now if you are looking for a fresh start in a relationship situation, the fact that Venus is going to be aligning with Uranus at the start of July is really interesting, because something could happen very quickly, something you're not necessarily planning for. And because you do like a degree of regularity, you like to know where you stand, what Uranus can do, and has been doing for some years, is been asking you to be less applied, less attached to that regularity, being a little bit more open to just flexing and going with the flow. So whether it's socially, around relationships, or even around your individual talents, something quite exciting can happen at the start of July. Thank you so much for joining me for this Venus Deep Dive special. Please check out my new website at patrickarundell.com. You can get your free daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, general, love and Vedic horoscopes, but also visit and use as much as you like my sensational three card tarot readings. It really is amazing. Please see the link below for more. So Gemini, for you, Venus moves into house 12. House 12 does have some potential challenges. Also, because of the connection to Pluto, which peaks on the 9th but is almost immediate, there may be a confidential matter, perhaps around a relationship. It could be around a contract, a financial matter, which you might not want to come into the open, which could end up in the open. So confidences could be broken, unfortunately. You might find out about someone who's not necessarily worthy of your complete trust. Someone may not necessarily be as sincere and unfortunately perhaps not even as faithful. So just be aware that if you're not especially happy with an existing relationship at the moment, the fact that for you, Pluto, the planet of transformation, is in the part of your chart to do with freedom. So if you're feeling psychologically trapped, limited, held back, the desire might be to break out. Also, because Venus then forges a very positive link in week 2 of June with your ruler Mercury in your sector of money, you might find that there is a conversation you have that's confidential that can be very positive. So someone may, for example, ask your opinion on a business idea, maybe the prospect of even being poached by another organisation. Or perhaps you're just going to do your own soundings, do some research, but you won't necessarily want to make it too public at that stage. But in any kind of relationship, I think the first week of July could be very, very tricky. I feel I have to be truthful with you. I'm going to tell you about all the positives next. But if there is something where you're not quite sure, so say for example you're seeing someone and neither of you are quite invested in the situation. Perhaps for now you just want to keep it absolutely clandestine between you. The thing with Uranus is the planet of higher truths, but also something could happen at the start of July that makes you want to escape that situation, but bizarrely also be connected to that situation. So in astrology, very often we do get the polarities, and it's not a certain outcome. Now, for you personally, you may not relate to any of those particular situations at the moment. You may be very happy in a relationship, may be very sincere, and one of the things you could do with Venus in the 12th house is actually be getting out those very old photo albums, or at least those digital pics, and thinking about someone who's no longer with us and feeling a heartfelt sense of loss. And you know, that can be a lovely thing, that connection, that sweet spot deep within your psyche to your past is something to really savour. Now, if you are someone who's got some creative talents but you're not quite sure how you would manifest them, once Venus arrives in your sign on the 4th of July, and of course Uranus on the 7th of July, it's going to be a new beginning for you, where something that you may be cooking up now quietly, contemplating, just mulling over what you might do. Keep that research going, keep the experimentation going in terms of that financial but also creative mix, because you're preparing the way for something that will in time come out very much more dynamically. Thank you so much for joining me for this Venus Deep Dive special. Please check out my new website at patrickarundell.com. You can get your free daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, general, love and Vedic horoscopes, but also visit and use as much as you like my sensational three card tarot readings. It really is amazing. Please see the link below for more. Cancer, for you, Venus this year has been evoking some different but in some ways very fascinating influences through the sign of Pisces, certainly giving you a desire to find your higher truth in terms of relationships, but you may have also connected to someone very different. You may have gone on a holiday and found it a very, very wonderful experience and immersed yourself. Then again, a lack of truth in a relationship could have showed up, particularly with Saturn applying to Venus and Neptune in the mix as well at that time. More recently, again, I think maybe it's been your professional connection or your connection to the world at large. Perhaps you've been building up your public profile if you're someone who works in, using digital media in some kind of way. But in the professional sphere, the connection of Venus in the 10th house means that people probably have become more conscious of the way you interact, how you handle the exchange of emails and meetings. And if you are someone who's a natural diplomat, it could have been something that's held you in good stead. So that brings us to Venus moving into your 11th house, but critically the arrival of Mercury in your sign, which is going to be joined, of course, on the 9th of June by the lovely Jupiter. Now we know they're going to be challenged by Saturn, but what you are going to have in week 2 of June is that delightful link between Mercury and also with Venus. And it could be that the arrival of Jupiter and together with Mercury, despite the more limiting and censorious energies of Saturn, is in a way pushing you to get in touch with what really is important to you. And that's interesting because the 11th house is really about our higher purpose. The first house, where Mercury is, where Jupiter is going to arrive, is very much about being an individual, but the 11th house, our higher purpose. And Venus is about what we love. So here's the question for you, Cancer. Are you doing, despite those professional opportunities with Venus in Aries, are you doing what really sets your soul free in terms of your higher purpose? That's a great question to ask yourself professionally. In terms of your romantic situation, if you are footloose and fancy free, you may find that someone connected to a friend of a friend, someone you meet in a random social situation, can really be a very impressive connection through to the 4th of July. But it could happen as late as that first week in July, that something accelerates and happens almost spontaneously, which really brings a sense of excitement. The other thing, if you're in an existing relationship, which like all of them has its moments, is just to stay in touch with the things you do have in common. The 11th house is about friendship. It's a very underrated part of any relationship, because as much as people talk about twin flames and a soul connection and so forth, sometimes if we can actually get beyond those tough moments in life by just jollying each other along and also appreciating the mutual things we give to each other, that's something that you can really embrace too over the next few weeks. So what about the square with Pluto, which provides the main backdrop through this period? Well, I feel if you're involved in something particularly financially, but maybe even sexually, that doesn't quite feel right for you, you're really being provoked to consider how that's actually influencing you, even chemically inside your body. Are you doing something that doesn't really feel quite right? That's the acid test for you in terms of the Venus square with Pluto. Thank you so much for joining me for this Venus Deep Dive special. Please check out my new website at patrickarundell.com. You can get your free daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, general, love and Vedic horoscopes, but also visit and use as much as you like my sensational three-card tarot readings. It really is amazing. Please see the link below for more. So Leo, there's few signs that have your charisma, but your charisma in the sign of Taurus with Venus's support can be amplified. It's just that as this event occurs, we have got Mercury has just moved into a very quiet and reflective area to be joined by Jupiter on the 9th of June. So the more psychological part of your connections is important, and also because Venus, the main influence that's forged is with Pluto in your sector of relating. You could be in a job which you're very good at, and it could be that people really like you there, but it's important that you're enjoying it as well. But if you are enjoying it, your skill in terms of cultivating good relationships and interacting with people, especially if you're doing something that's very much to do with fashion, or it's to do with the arts, or it's creative, Venus can really raise your profile through to the 4th of July. But because of the opposition to Pluto, just be aware, you could encounter someone who may feel that you're good, you've something to offer, but they may not be particularly persuaded by your silky words. So sometimes in life, however much we do try to come across in a way that we think would be pleasing, easy on the ear, someone can be very resolutely unimpressed. And you may encounter someone like that over the next few weeks, unfortunately. But just be aware, with Jupiter and Mercury developing in your 12th house, the more psychological part of life is going to become more important over the next year. And because Saturn and Neptune are in house 9, higher truths, some of the things that you may have to confront may not necessarily be easy. So as much as you could use this particular transit very productively professionally, when it comes to your romantic situation, Venus in the 10th house can be when we take that next step of commitment, when we bake something in. So in a traditional sense, that can be moving in, getting accommodation together, even getting spliced. But if you're not quite ready for that, then again, that's that Pluto square with Venus. But if your romantic situation is going well, it's well established, I just feel that maybe you could be a little bit surprised that over the next few weeks, despite the apparent superficial, I don't mean the relationship superficial, but despite superficial pleasantries, you might start gaining other insights, which can be very valuable actually. But if you are in a job, back to the professional situation, that you're really not enjoying, do stay very alert at the start of July, because a new opportunity can come like the clappers out of the sky, and it could be just what you want. Thank you so much for joining me for this Venus Deep Dive special. Please check out my new website at patrickarundell.com. You can get your free daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, general, love and Vedic horoscopes, but also visit and use as much as you like my sensational three-card tarot readings. It really is amazing. Please see the link below for more. Virgo for you, Venus is of course in Taurus, in your sister Earth sign. Its 9th house can be about a love of travel, it can be a love of culture, it could be developing a connection with someone who comes from a completely different background. It may be through traveling that you encounter someone you really, really like. You may go to see a show. If you're someone who has a particular understanding of languages, that can be something that lights up. If you've got a book that you're wanting to publish, if you're working with the internet, your skills in that regard can all glow up over the next month. So that's fabulous. Now Mercury, your ruler, in week 2 of June is linking very productively to the position of Venus. So don't be surprised if you find yourself invited in some kind of group situation to do something new, interesting and fresh. But what the 9th house can also be about, if a relationship's been struggling, and of course Venus has gone through your 7th house. Well, at the start of this year it was in house 6 where Pluto is, which itself is asking questions, but it was then in house 7 twice, but of course it had connected with both Saturn and Neptune. So I don't think your relationship situation has been necessarily easy, but if things are going forwards, it's because you've really worked at it, or you're really right for each other, because the 8th house, Aries, is much more to do with intimacy, shared resources, investment, stuff like that. So if you got beyond the Saturn factor, the Neptune factor, the detrimented factor of Venus in Aries, and you're still going strong, you've got something to celebrate for sure. And in week 2, it could be a great time to go on a date together. If, however, you're feeling a bit stifled in terms of how you earn a living, the fact that Venus starts this journey squaring up with Pluto, it just is repeating what Pluto is going to continue to say to you for some time. Your appreciation has been to have quite a set pattern of being, but if that has lost its allure, if you're going through the motions, essentially, you're not really feeling very passionate about whatever your metronomic life is about, Pluto will continue to urge you to make some changes. So the fact that Venus is squaring up with Pluto means that you could get some new information, or someone could encourage you to be a bit more daring. And at the start of July, that would be a fantastic time to really step outside of your comfort zone in quite a significant way. Thank you so much for joining me for this Venus Deep Dive special. Please check out my new website at patrickarundell.com. You can get your free daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, general, love and Vedic horoscopes, but also visit and use as much as you like my sensational three-card tarot readings. It really is amazing. Please see the link below for more. So Libra, of course, Venus rules your sign as well, but it has very different characteristics for you. For you, it's very much about presentation. It's how people first assimilate us. It can be about diplomacy. It can be about relating. It can be about partnership and harmony. But it also can be a little bit, please don't take this the wrong way, a little bit superficial. So what Venus in the sign of Taurus is asking you to consider is where your relationship is at in terms of the depth. So if you're in a tie, and because Saturn has just moved into your 7th house, Venus is just leaving it, if you're Neptune too, along with Chiron, if you're in a tie which, despite all your best efforts to interact skillfully, to listen carefully, to be very acknowledging, you want that to and fro, you understand there's a tip point between what you give and get. If you're not getting it, Venus moving into 8th house can be transformations, but can be endings. But the other thing that could happen, because Venus is most important aspect through this journey is with Pluto, you could encounter someone over the next 4 weeks or so who you actually find incredibly difficult to resist. So it may be someone who's got an intensity about them, but a magnetism. Maybe they're going to have very starry eyes, but their aura could be what actually turns you on. That's entirely possible. But also if you're in a relationship which has just had a lot of dramas, the other person isn't very good at tuning into you, what could happen is that you want to break free of the control, not the relationship or the person has on you, but it's more the situation, because you have the right to make a change. And now that Mercury, the planet of communication, is at the top of your chart and is about to be joined by Jupiter, that more leadership side of your nature is to the fore. Use it. So if you're not happy, this is going to be an important time. But if you're single, you could meet someone who really makes your pulse race. But if you're wanting to improve your financial situation, it's going to be your entrepreneurial skills which are flagged up over the next few weeks, particularly in week 2 of June, when Mercury, the planet of marketing, forges a fab link with Venus, the planet of money. Thank you so much for joining me for this Venus Deep Dive special. Please check out my new website at patrickarundell.com. You can get your free daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, general, love and Vedic horoscopes, but also visit and use as much as you like my sensational three-card tarot readings. It really is amazing. Please see the link below for more. Scorpio, Venus moves into a divine sector for you because it's house 7, but that actually, despite the host being very sultry, potentially seductive and coquettish. Taurus, because of the Earth, actually House 7 is very redolent of the energies of Venus's rulership of Libra. So relationships in house with Venus in House 7 can improve because our expectations perhaps are a little bit more lowered, in the sense that we can be a bit more forgiving, we can let things go, we can appreciate people for who they are. Sometimes, people can be very frustrated and we wish they weren't how they are, but that acceptance can change the energy even to a frustrating situation, change things up, and then that gets the dialogue moving again. Also, because Mercury is linking so fantastically well with Venus in week 2, what's not to like there? You could have a wonderful connection to somebody new, sharing of ideas, a collaboration, lovely. However, Pluto, your modern ruler, is in a square with Venus, so I think it's possible that as you go into this aspect, that someone close to you, perhaps a family member, however much you are trying to be cooperative, collaborative, and leaning into their needs, they might not necessarily be wanting to receive that, because in some way or another there's a bit of a shift of power going on. So just be conscious of that around home and family relationships too. Thank you so much for joining me for this Venus Deep Dive special. Please check out my new website at patrickarundell.com. You can get your free daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, general, love and Vedic horoscopes, but also visit and use as much as you like my sensational three card tarot readings. It really is amazing. Please see the link below for more. So Sagittarius, Venus moves into the part of your chart where you've had the stormy energies of Uranus, causing potential chaos full-time since March 2019, because the 6th house really likes a degree of routine. Uranus, of course, is very provocative, very rebellious, and therefore has in some ways kept pushing you to reinvent your approach to everyday routines, because being the person you are, which often has a huge view of life, the 6th house is asking you to focus down on details, which is not really your thing, but your genius may well have consistently come up over these last 7 years. So Venus coming into this area can bring a little bit of a healing balm, to be honest. It can be a good thing. And one of the good things around relationships with Venus in the 6th house, however much we say, I love you so much, my dear, my darling, you are my sweetheart forever, actually making someone a cup of tea on a cold, rainy morning, breakfast in bed, or saying, I've taken all the washing out of the machine, I've fed the cat, I've been to the shops, those kind of acts of camaraderie and affection, those practical things, can actually really work wonders. So if you are wanting to warm up an existing relationship, that's a great way to go about it, being thoughtful. But of course, the 6th house can also be about work and, your ability to relate well to people. Particularly in week 2 of June, you may be discussing a financial matter, and it could be a good outcome for you. But also, because Pluto is so powerful in this particular Venus transit, that's in the 3rd house, which is the way we express things. So it could be a case of not what you say, but how you say it in all sorts of relationships over the next 4 weeks. Thank you so much for joining me for this Venus Deep Dive special. Please check out my new website at patrickarundell.com. You can get your free daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, general, love and Vedic horoscopes, but also visit and use as much as you like my sensational three card tarot readings. It really is amazing. Please see the link below for more. So Capricorn, wonderfully for you, Venus moves into your 5th house. The 5th house for me is marriage, joy, playfulness. It can be where we want to date, mix and mingle. It can be where we want to be a bit cutesy. It can be where if we have children, we really celebrate their successes and their gifts. If you're wanting to add someone to your family, Venus in the 5th house, delicious too. And just as Venus arrives, so Mercury is waiting to forge a lovely angle in week 2 of June. So your connections to others are going to become more meaningful potentially with the arrival of Jupiter on the 9th of June, but they have to be meaningful because your ruler Saturn is going to be like the wise old sentinel guarding you to make sure that however much people seem like they can be lovely to get along with, Saturn's asking you to be a little bit doubtful. But that's part of your magic, your wisdom, and sometimes you see things and angles that other people don't, but that's very protective. But in a purely pleasurable way, Venus moving into the 5th house after going through Aries twice, and then also because of Saturn, your ruler, being in the 3rd house, and the collection of players, including Venus, that links up with it, has meant that sometimes whatever you've said this year just seems to have been the wrong thing as far as someone else is concerned. You haven't quite said it as they want it to be said. But Venus moving here is pure playtime. It is encouraging you to go out and have some fun. And if your romantic relationship that you're in at the moment has just become completely predictable and workaday, the first week of July would be a fantastic chance to get together, spend some quality time and do something completely different, get away from the humdrum, and it could really reignite the connection between you. Thank you so much for joining me for this Venus Deep Dive special. Please check out my new website at patrickarundell.com. You can get your free daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, general, love and Vedic horoscopes, but also visit and use as much as you like my sensational three card tarot readings. It really is amazing. Please see the link below for more. Aquarius, Venus moving into the 4th house is a lovely transit to think about how your home is. The 4th house can be about the home, but also Venus's more decorative gifts, particularly in the host of Taurus. So if you have been looking at some paint charts, considering how you might repurpose space in your house, declutter, all of those things, your timing is impeccable. But also if you're in the southern hemisphere, Venus in the 4th house could be those kind of things, but also it could be a desire to reconnect a bit more with family. If you're in the northern hemisphere, that 4th house energy could be time spent in the garden, going for lovely gentle walks in nature, getting by a river, a lake, the sea, the 4th house, and just getting in touch with nature. So that's a lovely thing to pursue. What about Pluto? Well, maybe if there is someone that you really like, you could, particularly if you're in some kind of family dynamic where someone tends to be quite a forceful person and tends to be the person who holds sway and other people are influenced by them, that could have quite a challenging impact with Pluto squaring up with Venus. So, if you're getting to know someone new and their parents, their folks, are not necessarily easily warming to you, that could be somewhat of a challenge, I feel. But if you are wanting to perhaps work from home, or if you do some work from home and you just want to make the space a bit better for you, I feel Venus moving through Taurus is a great time to consider that too. And for some water bearers, it may even be a consideration of exactly where you live. So moving could also be something you're discussing. Thank you so much for joining me for this Venus Deep Dive special. Please check out my new website at patrickarundell.com. You can get your free daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, general, love and Vedic horoscopes, but also visit and use as much as you like my sensational three card tarot readings. It really is amazing. Please see the link below for more. So Pisces, Venus of course is a planet which is exalted in your sign, but this year, because it was merging with Saturn and Neptune, you perhaps didn't get the best of it. Then when it's in Aries, you may have seen some kind of financial uptick in some ways, but because of the retrograde, maybe there were costs. So Venus breaking into your third house is lovely, I feel, because it gives you the chance to be more articulate, more sharing of your ideas, to even share sweet nothings. So it can be absolutely lovely. Also because it forges a beautiful link with Mercury in week 2. Things can just ease, you know, all sorts of situations can just speed up and get easier for you. If you're someone who's got something to say, a story to tell, the first week of July is going to be a big opportunity for you. But what about Pluto? If you're in a relationship where you're not quite sure what's going on, be very careful who you open up to. If you share some very sensitive or confidential information with someone who you can absolutely 100% rely upon, I don't feel that's going to be an issue. But it's not the best of times because of Pluto squaring with Venus. Venus can be, particularly for its rulership of Libra, a little bit superficial. And so we can just share something quickly. Third house is very quick. Not think too much about it, but actually then, because Pluto's in your 12th house of confidences, but also secret enemies, someone could seize on something they hear about you or see on social media. So keep your business very much to yourself. If there are some important discussions or developments around your love life, there may be someone around you that just be mindful that we can all have oodles of friends on our social media. For the vast amount of them, we've probably never met them. That doesn't mean to say a lot of those people aren't decent, but there could be someone around you that might be superficially very pleasant, but actually has got a bit of an agenda. So just watch out for that. And if you're writing or typing out anything, text messages or emails, do make sure that any flamboyance which you could feel with Venus in the third is tempered by how your message might be perceived if it was seen by somebody else, particularly if you are chatting someone up and it's getting a bit saucy. So guard your information very carefully over the next 4 weeks, but at the same time, if you use your ideas productively, some fantastic things are in store for you. Thank you so much for joining me for this Venus Deep Dive special. Please check out my new website at patrickarundell.com. You can get your free daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, general, love and Vedic horoscopes, but also visit and use as much as you like my sensational three-card tarot readings. It really is amazing. Please see the link below for more.